All right, and here we go down the back road. Today we're in our coupe riding. Right next to me in shotgun seat is Jared Bakaysa, our fantasy NASCAR analyst, a really rising member of the fantasy NASCAR industry. He's joined by myself, Seth Woolcock. We're missing our normal pilot here, Elliot Hicks, but we're going to do our best to break down everything fantasy NASCAR related that's happened over the last several weeks, and we're going to forecast the next couple weeks as well, because Jared, we got a little bit of a racing break coming up here soon.
Yeah, we got the Olympics coming up, which it's for a NASCAR fan like me, it kind of sucks that oh man, we're like almost 2 or 3 weeks without racing. But then like you also have to look at it from the driver standpoint. Like they run a full season basically. Like you think like their testing stuff starts mid-February, they go the whole way to mid-November, and then they still have like all the awards and stuff after the season. So they really only get maybe like a month or two off to spend time with their family. So I think the 2 weeks up here coming up for the Olympic break is going to be good for the families, good for the drivers to just chill back, just relax, refocus for the playoff push that's coming up here.
Yeah, I think for the entire teams, the pit crews, engineers, everyone who's working on these cars too, I think a much needed break will be good for this. We saw a little bit of a break right as the start of COVID last year, and it brought some really good racing on the way back. So we'll see how that plays out. But before then, Jared, I think we should jump into our first segment of the night, Byway Breakdown. All right, Jared. So since our last episode of the Back Road, we've had 4 races in 3 weeks. Really a lot of shift in the standings, in the fantasy NASCAR outlook for things as well. Obviously, Kyle Larson, he continued his dominance at Nashville when NASCAR returned there for the first time in a decade, and he won in Nashville. Alex Bowman, the showman, he pulls off a last lap miracle to win Pocono 1, steal it from his teammate Larson, who went down with a flat tire. Second race, Jared, you're a huge Rowdy fan, so you I'm sure we're happy. Broken shifter and all, Rowdy pulls off one of the most amazing fuel mileage victories I've seen probably within the last 5 or so years. And then no doubt about it, Chase Elliott, he returns to victory lane, returns to that road course ringer title that we have come to know with him throughout his young career. Pulls off a victory at Road of America this last week. Jared, since the last time we've talked, man, what are your big takeaways from these last 4 races here in the NASCAR scene?
Well, I'm going to first off and kudos to NBC and their coverage with NASCAR. I think they've done a phenomenal job these last couple weeks. But we'll start with Nashville. Nashville was an awesome race. I love that they ran the 750 horsepower package there. You saw passing, saw guys sliding around trying to control their cars, and that's really where Larson thrives. Like he loves. I think he really likes that package. I just think he just has that overall speed. Like once he got the lead there late in the race, like I knew no doubt, like he's probably going to win because what was that? That was like his third win in a row or whatever, not
Yes, sir.
counting the All Star race. So like you can't count him out. But I thought the Nashville race was pretty good, especially for the first time that they've been there, like you said, over a decade, and some of the Cup guys have been there. So that was pretty cool to see Nashville. I was at the 2 Pocono race, and I'll tell you what, that was probably the best atmosphere and best Pocono races I've gone to in a while. Like I got to see the truck race Saturday morning before the Cup race. I got to see the Xfinity race before the Cup race on Sunday. So it was just a whole action-packed weekend full of racing. But I'll even be honest, like from a fan standpoint, whenever I saw the whole battle between Bowman and Larson there at the end was awesome. Like I was literally standing up like the last 10 laps because I was just waiting to see what happens. Like, are they going to get into each other? Where's he going to pass him? When's he going to pass him? And then from where I was sitting, I'm sitting like up about a little bit right at the start finish line. Like the start finish line is up to my left,
Mm-hmm.
and like Larson blew his tire in turn 3, but I didn't realize he blew a tire. Like I thought he just took the turn high, and then I'm standing there like, man, wonder what happened, and like how just the weird angle or whatever.
Yeah.
I saw him come down the finish line. I'm like, wait, on the scoreboard, and it was like the Alex Bowman one. I'm like, what? No way. And the next thing you know, you see Larson's like damaged car drive by. I'm like, oh man, that's huge for that. But still, like the Hendrick cars were just dominant that weekend. Like even Sunday, like William Byron was contending for the win
Yes.
there. But
Yep.
I'm not even being biased either. But I think that Sunday Pocono race with Kyle Busch winning was probably like one of my top. It probably tops that list of like all-time favorite races I've seen live or watched live. But just the fact that I didn't have my scanner for the race because I just wanted to enjoy like an old school, like no scanners, just see what happens as it plays out. And you had like Brad Keselowski's out there; he has like a 15-second lead. And I'm like, oh, when's he gonna go out? He goes down to pit, and then William Byron's leading. He has like a 10-second lead, and then next thing you know, he pits with 3 to go. And I'm like, oh, it's Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin. And then Denny Hamlin pits in the last lap. And I'm like, man, is Kyle Busch going to make it, or is he going to run out of fuel and Bubba Wallace wins? Like I don't know I didn't know what was going to happen until the final turn, but just the fact that he didn't have his broken transmission or broken clutch, stuck in fourth gear the whole time. Like if there was a caution there in that last stretch, he wasn't winning that race. But just the fact that he wheeled that thing for over half the race, like that takes some incredible driving skill. I'm sure. I'm not a racer. I don't know that much about the interior types of cars and stuff like that to that extent, but I would say that's probably pretty difficult, not as easy as we think it is on TV.
For someone who's driven standard cars, like I can tell you that's extremely difficult. Like his clutch was burned out at the end, and it was really from a non-fan perspective, like of Kyle Busch. Just to witness that greatness there was truly remarkable. And it really was probably the best race I've seen within the last maybe 2 months of the season.
It was even nice, too, that it was a fuel mileage race because ever since we started doing stage racing and back in 2016, like we haven't I think they basically made the stages so it eliminates fuel mileage races, which like I was up on the fence on that. Like I love stage races, don't get me wrong, but I just think like a good fuel mileage race here and there is not bad. And like we saw that, like I said, I was standing up the last 10 laps because I'm like, man, is he gonna run out? Is he not gonna run out? Like that's entertaining to me, I would say. And just the fact that just go backtrack there with Kyle Busch, like with that burnout clutch and everything, like he's trying to save fuel too there at the end. So that's probably pretty tricky.
I think overall, from a fantasy NASCAR perspective as well, Jared, it was a little bit more of the same. We saw the Hendricks cars continue to dominate in that aspect. Kyle Busch, obviously, he's been huge, has about a 4.3 average finish over the last 4 races. He's been big for fantasy NASCAR managers who have grabbed him. Kurt Busch also, he's had a top 10 finish average the last couple weeks as well. He's kind of caught fire here later in the season. Joey Logano, Kevin Harvick, they also are right around there with about 10.5 and 11 average for Logano and Harvick. So they've been in the top 10 consistently, haven't really threatened for that win. But out of those 3 guys or anyone else that you've seen the last couple weeks, maybe not there threatening for a win, but is there consistently? Do you like any of those drivers moving forward here?
I think Harvick's eventually going. Like I know we keep saying this every single episode, or every single fantasy owner is probably thinking like Kevin Harvick's got to win here. But we're going to Atlanta, where he's won before multiple times, and we're going to New Hampshire in 2 weeks, where he won 2 years ago. So I think Harvick's got to eventually break that. He's a veteran. He's still been running top 10 the last couple weeks, like you just said. So he's due for something there. Like if he can break that Hendrick dominance right now, like he's still one of those. If you take Hendrick out of the field, he's like one of the top 5 drivers, basically, is what it comes down to in my mind. So I think it's only a matter of time before he figures something out and the rest of the field figures something out. So we start maybe seeing more of a competitive, like second half of the season, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it was a super, super competitive early season. We've seen a lot of Hendrick dominance the last few months. It's tough. It's tough to predict racing. It's tough to predict fantasy racing, especially. But we're going to try our best. We're going to move forward into our next segment of the night, Horizon Forecast. We're going to be looking through the windshield here. Next 2 races before that Olympic break, Jared, are Atlanta and New Hampshire. Obviously, Kyle Larson and Kevin Harvick, they've led the most laps at Atlanta since 2018. So I'm expecting a lot of the same here. I'm expecting maybe a Kyle Larson dominated race. Maybe Kevin Harvick, Denny Hamlin, one of those veterans can mix it in, shake it up late. And Harvick, you just talked about him again there, Jared. He actually this represents maybe what is Kevin Harvick's last chance of winning this season, or at least before the playoffs, that is. Right now, he leads the fields for Atlanta and New Hampshire in average finishes since 2018 for these next two tracks. So Harvick's definitely a favorite coming into these tracks. If he doesn't qualify well, I think he's going to be a great DFS play these next few weeks. Jared, what can we expect from these drivers from a fantasy NASCAR perspective and just a NASCAR perspective heading into New Hampshire and Atlanta?
Well, the good thing about Atlanta is I know there's not practice and qualifying for this one, but the guys did race there earlier in the spring, so I think a lot of them can look back and look at some of their notes from earlier in the year. Like you saw, Kyle Larson obviously dominated and then got passed there late by Ryan Blaney. So like I would still expect Larson to show up. Obviously you're going to see all the Hendrick cars show up, so that's a no-brainer there. But if you look through the field, like Ryan Blaney, you're still looking at him. He has an average of 9.75. And one win, 2 top 5s, and 3 top 10s in the last 4 races there. So he's one of the better Penske guys there. I think he's actually the best out of the 3 in the last 4 races at Atlanta for Ryan Blaney. So he's one to watch. And like you said with Kevin Harvick, like he's obviously dominated the last 4 races there, 2 wins, 3 top 5s, 4 top 10s, and over 300 laps led there. So if Harvick can get up front, I think it's going to be Harvick's time. And I think once he catches fire, I think we're going to see last year's Kevin Harvick maybe show up and maybe try to redeem himself from what happened last year in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think regardless, whatever happens from a fantasy perspective, I really look forward to New Hampshire. I think New Hampshire is a really underrated track. I think it's a lot of fun. Definitely one of the more interesting, diverse tracks in the field. So I'm looking forward to that personally. And hopefully we can see a little bit of diversity in Victory Lane, as it's been quite the same the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it has been. But I think like even if it's not these 2 weeks, I think we're going to see a lot different things after that 2-week break, because you're going to have all the teams be able to catch up on their notes and stuff. Because like you think about it, you race on Sunday, travel back Monday, then you like how much time do you actually have to like go over notes, go over strategies and stuff for the upcoming race that you have to travel to, like what, Friday or probably earlier than that. So I think having 2 weeks, everyone's going to be able to regroup, just focus, clear their minds, and get set for that second half, like I said. But with New Hampshire coming up, there's some guys I'm looking forward to that one. I think Martin Truex might get back on the wagon. He hasn't really done that hot the last couple weeks. Like I haven't really seen his name up there running or competing for laps led, but he's pretty good there. He's got 2 top 5s and 3 top 10s there in the last 3 races, and Denny Hamlin too. He's been good there. So I would maybe those Toyotas can start picking things up here coming at New Hampshire.
Keep an eye out for Tyler Reddick, too, I think, moving forward. He has great average finishes. He dominated both these tracks in the Xfinity Series as well. So keep an eye out for him. He's had a couple top 10 finishes the last few weeks, so I think he's kind of getting his stride a little bit as well.
I'll even throw out a name here, too. I think Ross Chastain's going to start competing things for 2, because when I was at Pocono, like, just it's different on compared to TV, because you can actually see the cars, like, especially at Pocono where you can see the backstretch, you can visually see how fast cars are. Like I visually saw how fast Kyle Busch was earlier in the race, because he started like I think 19th or something in the Sunday race, and he worked his way up the whole way to the top 5 by the end of the first stage. But it was just visually cool to see him flying through the field. But that was like Ross Chastain. Like I know he got caught up in some incidents in the 2 races, but like he had visually had some good speed there, I noticed. And I think with that big news with Trackhouse, I think he's obviously going to have to push a little bit harder if he's going to try to keep his ride for next year. So be on the lookout for him also.
Yeah, let's go ahead and move into our next segment. It's a new one here on the back road, fantasy sleepers and keepers. Jared, last time when we had the girls on from Fast Lap Podcast, we did a little bit of fantasy dark horse picks. So this is going to be similar, but we're also going to be talking about sleepers. People, a lot of these fantasy NASCAR analysts aren't picking someone who can give you an edge for not a very high price in DFS moving forward, as well as some guys who have proven to be hot the last couple of weeks that we're going to continue to ride with here. So, Jared, start me out with your keeper, if you would.
For my keeper, I'm going to have to go with Kyle Busch. He started last at Road America and finished 3rd in the race. So the fact that he was able to do that through the field, and that was like the same thing at Pocono, the second Pocono race where he started like 19th or whatever in a track that's hard to pass. Like he worked his way up to win. I think he's one of the best Gibbs cars right now. Like I know Denny Hamlin's still leading the points with his average and stage things, but just overall races and Kyle Busch being able to finish races there at the end, like I said earlier, like you take those Hendrick guys out, I think he's probably number 1 or number 2 right now in the standings without the Hendrick guys.
Oh yeah, it definitely without the Hendricks guys, he has been the best probably over these last 2 months. He has 2 victories on the season where he's just really, wielded those cars to victory out of sure will. So I think Kyle Busch, he's a great keeper moving forward. My keeper is actually a guy we just touched on, Ross Chastain. On our last podcast, he was my fantasy dark horse. After that, he's followed it up with a couple really good performances. Like you said, in Pocono, didn't have a strong performance just because he got caught up in some incidents. But when you look at Ross Chastain, he has 3 top 5s and 4 top 10s in the last 7 races. And yes, some of those are road courses for sure. But like even at Nashville, like he honestly threatened for that win at Nashville. He's had speed. He's been aggressive at times. Sometimes, like this last week, we saw it cost him a little bit, being maybe a little too aggressive at times. But I think overall, Ross Chastain, he's a guy, like you said, we haven't really touched on the Trackhouse news, but with that news, he's fighting for a job next year, and I think he deserves it. He's raced his butt off, and for DFS specifically, he's a guy who's starting a lot of the times in the mid-20s. So you're getting that bonus for him for his start position and a finish position if he can move up through the field. So Ross Chastain, he's a guy that I'm looking to keep in my lineups moving forward here.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. Ross is just always, I think he's always outperformed the equipment that he's had. Like back when he was in the premium motorsports 15 car, like he'd be like, no one really noticed, but like he'd be starting probably like 37th, 38th or whatever. Then he'd work his way to get like maybe a mid 20s finish or whatever, which is like awesome for him. And then like, just like DFS owners, like that's like guaranteed points right there just for moving up in starting positions. And that's the same with like when he filled in at Roush, like for Newman, those couple races, like he did pretty good in those times. And now that he got his Ganassi ride, he's been doing pretty good there. And like you just said, I think with him fighting for a ride, I think that's just going to push him a little bit harder now. And I think he's probably not going to care if he roughs anyone up. I think he's just going to go for it because at this point he kind of has to. His career's on the line.
Yeah, he's making a serious playoff push, and when I'm betting on people and drivers in NASCAR, sometimes that attitude and that spark, that fire, that's something I want. And Ross Chastain, like you said, Jared, he's been a guy that you and I have followed for probably the last 5 or so years and watched him come up because he was a bottom feeder in fantasy NASCAR, but he was a guy you could pick up late and who was going to normally do better than a lot of those other guys, and he stuck around. So he's obviously talented at what he does. We'll see what kind of plays out with the Ganassi situation, but Ross Chastain, definitely a guy to keep your eye on. Jared, moving forward here, who is your sleeper? Who's a guy kind of under the radar that no one's really talking about right now that you think people should be riding with, getting them in their lineups here in the next couple weeks?
This is going to be a hot take. I'm going to say Eric Almirola. Okay, so his average, I'm basing this off of New Hampshire because I've been trying to look ahead. But a number that stuck out with me is Eric Almirola has an average finish of 7 in the last 3 races there. So he has 1 top 5 and 2 top 10s there. And with how the qualifying and stuff format works, you're probably going to see him starting maybe a little bit mid-pack, depending on how he does in Atlanta. But if he continues, I think he knows how to race there. And I think he's always been good at New Hampshire. So I think if he can do that, he's going to get you some points for position move-ups.
Absolutely. I like that pick, Jared. My sleeper for you, also maybe another little controversial one, but let's look at Chase Briscoe.
Okay.
Yeah. I was very hot on Briscoe coming into the season, maybe a little too hot. But he finally got that first top 10 performance here this last week. He actually threatened a couple weeks ago to actually win a race too, which I think gave him a lot of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a lot earlier on in the season when we saw him, and a lot of it was probably because he wasn't qualifying, he wasn't practicing, but he looked out of place early on. But now, like outside of Kevin Harvick, he's looked like. And Eric Almirola last few weeks has looked formidable as well. But I think Briscoe's a guy who he's probably not going to qualify great. He'll probably start in those mid-20s. But he's a guy who he could get up to the top 15 and get you some nice points, I think. Like he's not a guy who's going to win you a week. But he's very competitive, and he looks like he's finally kind of starting to find his place, as does the whole Stewart-Haas team. Like, they're not the dominant team they were a few seasons ago, but they're formidable, and they're a value now in DFS because of that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's like the situation in 2017. Joe Gibbs Racing didn't win Joe Gibbs Racing didn't win a single race until New Hampshire. That was in July. Okay, and then they right after that they just started going on a tear because Kyle Busch started winning, Denny Hamlin started to win, or they didn't have Matt Kenseth then, but either way, like maybe that's a Stewart-Haas type of situation. Maybe they're just trying to catch up. Maybe they're a little bit behind because, like I think we talked about this in one of the episodes. Is like teams come and go basically throughout the years. Like one year Gibbs is really good, and then Hendrick's down here. Stewart-Haas is really good, and then Gibbs is down here. But now it's like it's Hendrick's turn again. So Hendrick's up here. Oh, look at that, Stewart-Haas is down here. But it's a balance. Everything's going to eventually balance out here. And I think like what you were saying about Briscoe, like, yeah, I think Briscoe's starting to come along now because he's finally gotten to drive that car finally on multiple tracks with different packages. And he's actually gotten to race it a lot more compared to the first couple seasons or first couple races. And then the first couple episodes we were talking about, like, wow, he's not doing that good. But now that he's got that experience and like actually understands how to drive the car and stuff, I think he's working his way up. And I think it also helps that you have Kevin Harvick as a teammate, so that I'm sure Harvick's probably helping him out a lot more than what we see.
Yeah, absolutely, Jared. I've loved what we've kind of been seeing a little bit here in NASCAR the last couple of weeks. We've been seeing some of these younger guys, some of these more underdog characters kind of come up and at least run consistently. And that's what we're looking for when we play fantasy NASCAR. Consistency, good finishes, maybe lead a little laps if you can, but it's been tough to come by this season with Larson. All right, Jared, let's go ahead and move into our final segment here, Backroad Advice and Backroad Stories. A big part of NASCAR and fandom is eventually one day hoping you can meet your favorite driver or just a NASCAR driver in general. They're a little more approachable than some athletes in some sports. Jared, you recently had an encounter at a local speedway here in Pennsylvania. Could you kind of explain your approach to that, how everything kind of played out there, and where you were and who you met?
Well, so this past weekend, the Cars Touring Series, which is a smaller racing series. It's not your ARCA series. It's not your K&N series. It's kind of a development series that's like a lot of their races are down like North Carolina, South Carolina, like those, and they work their way up north a little bit. But the big Cars Tour came up to Jennerstown, PA, which is our local speedway, and they had some of the drivers came up, talked to the stands. I got to meet Cody Connor. He's from Kannapolis, North Carolina, so he knows where Dale Jr. and Dale Earnhardt and Daniel Hemricker. He was born in that area, and he came up into the stands and was just handing out. I actually have it. He was handing out these little postcards to autograph. Like he was in his fire suit and all. He just took time out of his day.
Wow.
He just came up to the stands, just started talking to people, just asking them how they are, where they're from, like what they like and stuff. And he signed this for me, and I'm like, that's cool. So like whenever he's in NASCAR, if he ever makes it to Sundays, I think that'll be pretty cool that I got to see him at the local short tracks. And then another guy I met, I think a lot of people are probably familiar. I got to meet the Josh Berry there at the race too.
Yes, sir.
If you guys don't know Josh Berry, he races for Junior Motorsports, and he actually made his Cup debut at Dover. So I have seen a lot of racing by Josh Berry in the last couple of weeks. But overall, that whole experience at Jennerstown was pretty cool. Like they had driver intros in the grandstands. They had all the drivers come from the pit and like right by the start finish line where they have it, and like all the fans, they said, oh, we can come down, the drivers are going to be here for half an hour, come down, get autographs, get pictures. So of course I went down there and got a picture with Josh Berry and chatted a bit. And just to give you guys also a perspective on like what the Cars Tour series is, there's a lot of young up and coming drivers that are in that series. So some of the names I'll name: Corey Heim was in that race. He won the ARCA race at Pocono last Friday. So he was in that race. Derek Griffith was racing, who just recently got contacted by Kyle Busch and will be racing in the Truck Series race at Gateway. And you have some younger guys like Carson Quapple. So if you're an older fan, remember Travis Quapple, his son was
Oh,
racing.
yeah.
So yeah, then you got Cody Connor racing. So I thought that was pretty neat that you got to see those guys, like got to see some of those up and comer guys. Oh, Garrett Smithley. Garrett Smithley was also
Okay.
racing too.
Okay. Great. Great.
So there were a lot of he's also a local from he's from Ligonier, PA.
Okay.
So that's his like home track, and he had a free weekend to come down and race. So yeah, they were all super nice guys. Like I said, they were down at like right down by the start finish line. You just go up, chat with them, take a picture, and they were all pretty awesome. Like they were glad we came out to support them, and I'm glad I went down for that.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Awesome. And Jared, when you approach drivers, like what's your like piece of advice for fans who are approaching drivers? Because sometimes you can definitely make maybe a rash or a not a great impression. Fans sometimes get bad raps. So how do you really kind of make the most out of that encounter?
How I do it is I don't really like go out of my way and be like obnoxious about it. I just like if they're talking to someone, I'm just gonna just let them be, just let them continue talking. I don't want to be that person that goes interrupt, like, "Hey, Josh Berry, what's going on?" while he's talking to someone. Like I have that like neutral respect for people like that. So I usually just wait my turn if they're free or whatever. I'm like, "Hey, Josh Berry, how you doing?" or something. That's how I basically approached him because he wasn't signing anything for anyone. He just signed something for someone, and I just got chatting with him. He liked my shirt because I was wearing a Josh Berry T-shirt, so that kind of helped. But or even whenever Cody Connor came up to the stand to talk to us, like, and just asked him, "Hey, how you doing?" And like, it's not like they are so like they're bigger named people, but like just treat them like one of your friends. Just be like, "Hey, how you doing?" Like, they're not.
Thank them for their work
Yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah.
I liked what you're doing. I love your paint. Like, I did compliment him on his paint scheme because if you look up Cody Connor, he has probably one of the best paint schemes that I've ever seen in my life. Like, not even joking.
Mhm.
Like, everyone needs to go look up his paint scheme and follow him. But yeah, they're just your ordinary people. So just treat them like you would your best friend. Like, don't be obnoxious about it. Just if you're cool with them, they're gonna be cool with you.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Jared, that's been great advice. I feel like we've given a great combination of lifestyle and fantasy NASCAR advice to our listeners and our viewers today. And that's what we're trying to do here at the Back Road. We're going to continue to do this. We're on here every 3 weeks at In Between Media on our YouTube channel. Make sure if you're sticking around, please hit that subscribe button. It really does help us out moving forward here. Jared, any final thoughts here for our audience before we peel out of the Back Road?
Oh, I would just say that if you want some cool shades like this, I would check out the yeatsofficial.com website. My boys from the Chairgating podcast told me about this, and if you use the discount code Chairgating, you get 10% off of these. Definitely go.
Hashtag not a sponsor yet. Hashtag not a sponsor
Hashtag
yet.
no sponsor yet, but I just wanted to give some clout to my Chairgating boys, and hopefully they see this and give me a thumbs up for that. Maybe like and share our stuff. Go follow Chairgating also. They have some good stuff also.
Absolutely. Well, Jared, thank you for all your work here at the Back Road. Thank you for all your work here at In Between Media, really bringing us into the fantasy NASCAR and the NASCAR community. It is much appreciated. Thank you to everyone who tuned in tonight. For Jared and Seth, this was the Back Road, and we'll catch you next time, folks.